my wife declared. This marriage is holding me back. I need to focus on my career. I simply said, then focus. A year later, after losing her job and her shine, she came back saying, let's rebuild. I just smiled. Already did, without you. The silence that followed said everything. Sarah had been different for weeks, distant in a way that felt calculated rather than natural. I knew something was coming, but the conversation at Romano's still caught me off guard. We'd been going to that little Italian place in downtown Portland for 3 years, ever since our second date. The familiar smell of garlic and basil should have been comforting, but tonight it felt like a backdrop for something ending. I've been thinking about us, she said, swirling her wine glass without taking a sip. About where we're heading. I set down my fork, giving her my full attention. After 4 years of marriage, I'd learned to recognize when Sarah was building up to something significant. There's this position opening up, she continued, her voice gaining momentum. Senior Marketing Director at TechFlow Solutions. It's everything I've been working toward, Jake. Real money, real influence, the chance to actually make an impact in Silicon Valley. I nodded, waiting for her to get to the point. TechFlow was one of those prestigious startups that burned through employees faster than venture capital funding. Sarah had been obsessing over their company culture for months. The thing is, she paused, meeting my eyes directly, this opportunity requires complete dedication. We're talking 60-hour weeks minimum, frequent travel between here and San Francisco, networking events that go until midnight. The kind of commitment that doesn't leave room for maintaining a traditional marriage. The words hung between us like smoke. I could see she'd rehearsed this speech, probably practiced it in the mirror while I was at my environmental consulting firm, analyzing water quality reports and pretending our relationship wasn't slowly dissolving. So what are you saying exactly? I asked, though I already knew. I'm saying this marriage is holding me back from reaching my full potential. Her voice was steady, businesslike. I need to focus entirely on my career right now, without the distractions and obligations that come with being someone's wife. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. There was no regret there, no sadness about what she was suggesting. Just the cold calculation of someone who'd already made her decision and was simply informing me of the outcome. Then focus, I said quietly. She blinked, clearly thrown by my response. I could see the confusion flickering across her features. This wasn't the script she'd prepared for. She'd expected arguments, negotiations, maybe tears and desperate pleas for her to reconsider. Instead, she was getting calm acceptance. That's it? She asked, her voice rising slightly. You're not going to fight for us? Try to convince me we can make it work somehow? I took a sip of my wine, considering my words carefully. Sarah, you just told me that being married to me is preventing you from becoming who you want to be. Why would I argue with that assessment? The silence stretched between us. Around us, other couples were laughing, sharing desserts, living the kind of normal evening we used to have. Now we were the table having the conversation that would be remembered as the moment everything changed. I've been strategizing this for weeks, she admitted, her professional mask slipping slightly. I expected you to negotiate, maybe suggest compromises or alternative arrangements. I didn't think you'd just... She gestured helplessly, accept it? What did you want me to say? That I'd be okay being treated like an inconvenience? That I'd wait around hoping you'd eventually decide I'm worth your time again? Her face flushed. It's not like that. This is about my future, our financial security. TechFlow could set us up for life. Us? I asked. You just said the marriage was holding you back. There is no us in the scenario you're describing. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. For the first time since she'd started talking, I saw doubt creep into her expression. The confident marketing executive was gone, replaced by someone who was beginning to realize she might have miscalculated the conversation entirely. Sarah moved out with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning her exit strategy for weeks. Within 3 days, she'd packed her essentials and relocated to TechFlow's corporate housing downtown, a sterile furnished apartment that screamed temporary professional arrangement. She left behind our wedding gifts, photo albums, and most of the furniture we'd bought together, as if acknowledging these things would complicate the clean break she was orchestrating. I watched her carry boxes to her leased Audi, noting how she avoided eye contact during the process. "This doesn't have to be permanent," she said on her final trip, standing in our doorway with her laptop bag slung over her shoulder. "Once I get established in the role, maybe we can figure out how to make things work." I was sitting at our kitchen table, reading environmental impact reports for a new client. "You made your choice, Sarah. Own it." Her phone buzzed constantly during our conversation, probably TechFlow scheduling another networking event or strategy session. She glanced at it reflexively, proving my point about divided attention better than any argument could. The text started that same evening. "Just wanted you to know I'm settling in okay. The corporate housing is nice, great view of the river." I didn't respond. 2 days later, "How are you handling everything? I know this is a big adjustment." I waited until the next morning to reply, "I'm fine. Doing well actually." That clearly wasn't the response she wanted. Her next message came within minutes. "I meant what I said about this being temporary. I'm just focusing on my career right now, getting my feet under me professionally." "When you say temporary," I wrote back, "what exactly do you mean? Are you planning to quit the job you left me for?" The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before she responded. "We can discuss the details later when things settle down." "No," I replied. "We can discuss them now. Either you chose your career over our marriage, or this is some kind of sabbatical you expect me to wait through. Which is it?" She called instead of texting, but I let it go to voicemail. Her message was rambling, full of corporate buzzwords about synergy and strategic positioning, but the underlying message was clear. She wanted me to treat this like a temporary separation while she pursued her dream job. I called her back that evening. "This isn't a break, Sarah. You didn't ask for space or time to think. You said our marriage was holding you back from your potential. Those are divorce words, not separation words." "You're being dramatic," she said, but I could hear uncertainty creeping into her voice. "I'm being realistic. You can't have it both ways. Either we're married and working through challenges together, or you're single and focused on your career. Pick one." The silence on her end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, she said, "I just need you to understand that this opportunity won't last forever." "Neither will I," I said and hung up. Her mother called me 3 days later from Colorado, confused and concerned. "Jake, honey, Sarah told me you two were having some temporary difficulties, but she was very vague about the details. What's really going on?" I appreciated Margaret's directness. She'd always been straightforward with me, unlike her daughter's recent tendency toward corporate doublespeak. "Sarah left me to focus on her career, Margaret. She said being married was preventing her from reaching her full potential. I'm respecting her decision." "She left you?" Margaret's voice rose. She made it sound like mutual space or something couples do nowadays. "No, she made a unilateral decision that our marriage was incompatible with her professional goals. I'm not treating that like a temporary inconvenience." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "That girl has always been ambitious, but this sounds selfish," I suggested. I was going to say short-sighted, but yes, selfish works too. 3 months passed, and I discovered what life looked like when someone wasn't constantly evaluating whether I was supporting their ambitions adequately. I started rock climbing at Smith Rock on weekends, something Sarah had always dismissed as too dangerous and time-consuming. The physical challenge and mental focus required to navigate those sandstone walls felt like meditation after years of walking on eggshells around someone's career trajectory. I enrolled in a craft brewing class at a local community college, partly because I'd always been curious about the process and partly because Sarah had considered my interest in beer childish and unprofessional. Turns out, fermentation science was fascinating, and the instructor, a retired chemist named Bill, appreciated my analytical approach to measuring specific gravity and understanding temperature control. I reconnected with my college friend Marcus, who I'd barely seen since Sarah decided our friend group wasn't sophisticated enough for her networking goals. We started meeting for basketball at the rec center every Thursday, and I remembered what it felt like to laugh without worrying whether someone was judging the conversation as insufficiently ambitious. Sarah's attempts at contact became increasingly frequent as her initial excitement about corporate independence wore off. She'd text about practical matters that didn't require my input. The corporate housing lease might get extended. Work is intense but rewarding. Then personal inquiries disguised as casual check-ins. How are you adjusting to having the house to yourself? Are you eating okay? I responded only to questions about our joint investments, referring her to our shared financial advisor for everything else. When she asked about my well-being, I maintained complete emotional distance. The silence clearly frustrated her, based on the frequency of her follow-up messages. At work, my colleagues at Pacific Environmental Consulting began commenting on my renewed energy. I took on the challenging Cascade Watershed Restoration project, something that would have stressed Sarah out because it required occasional overnight trips to remote monitoring stations. Without having to negotiate every professional decision through the lens of how it affected her schedule, I found myself genuinely excited about work again. You seem different lately, my project manager Linda observed during our monthly review. More engaged with the technical challenges. Whatever's changed in your personal life, it's working professionally. She was right. Without Sarah's constant pressure to optimize every aspect of my career for maximum income potential, I was rediscovering why I'd chosen environmental consulting in the first place. The satisfaction of protecting natural resources felt meaningful again, rather than just a stepping stone to afford Sarah's lifestyle ambitions. Sarah's messages evolved from practical updates to probing questions about my emotional state. So you posted about rock climbing. That looks dangerous. When did you start doing that? I didn't respond. Haven't heard from you in weeks. Just wanted to make sure you're taking care of yourself. I waited 2 days before replying. I'm doing fine. Thanks for checking. Her response came immediately. We should probably talk soon about logistics. Holiday plans, tax preparations, that sort of thing. What logistics? I wrote back. You chose to be single and career-focused. Handle your own holiday plans. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared multiple times before she responded. I meant our shared responsibilities. Tax stuff, insurance, the investment accounts. I forwarded her message to our financial advisor with a note. Please handle all communications about our joint accounts directly with Sarah. Remove me from any decisions requiring her input. That evening, she called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was longer this time, less confident. Jake, I think we need to have an actual conversation about where we stand. This silent treatment isn't solving anything, and frankly, it's making everything more complicated than it needs to be. I know you're probably angry, but we're both adults here. Call me back when you get this. I deleted the message without calling back. She was right about one thing though, I wasn't angry anymore. Anger required caring about the outcome, and I'd moved past that entirely. It was at Smith Rock on a crisp Saturday morning that I met Emma. I was working through a challenging 5.9 route when my chalk bag slipped, and she offered to spot me from below. Emma was a freelance photographer, specializing in outdoor adventure shoots, and she had this refreshing way of talking about her work without making it sound like a strategic career maneuver. I love capturing people in moments when they're completely present, she explained as we shared trail mix at the base of the cliff. Rock climbing does that. Forces you to focus on exactly where you are instead of worrying about where you think you should be. Her comment struck me as profound in a way that Sarah's corporate buzzwords never had. We talked easily about everything from route beta to environmental conservation, and I found myself genuinely interested in her perspective rather than calculating how her responses reflected on my own goals. Emma appreciated my methodical approach to climbing. Where Sarah had viewed my analytical nature as boring, Emma saw it as thorough and thoughtful. You actually read the rock, she observed, watching me plan my moves before starting a route. Most people just throw themselves at the wall and hope for the best. We started climbing together regularly. Emma's presence felt comfortable in a way I'd forgotten was possible. She never checked her phone mid-conversation or seemed distracted by networking opportunities. When we talked about work, she asked specific questions about environmental impact assessments because she was genuinely curious, not because she was evaluating my career trajectory for its earning potential. What got you into environmental consulting? she asked one afternoon as we drove back from a climbing session in the Columbia River Gorge. I found myself explaining my undergraduate research on watershed pollution, something I hadn't talked about in years because Sarah considered academic interests irrelevant unless they translated into immediate professional advancement. Emma listened without trying to redirect the conversation toward more ambitious career planning. The contrast with my marriage became impossible to ignore. With Sarah, every conversation eventually circled back to optimization, how we could leverage our combined income, which social events would benefit our professional networks, whether my hobbies were sophisticated enough for her image goals. With Emma, conversations flowed naturally toward shared interests and genuine curiosity about each other's thoughts. You have this way of explaining complex environmental systems that makes them accessible, Emma told me after I described the ripple effects of salmon habitat restoration. It's obvious you care about the work itself, not just the paycheck. 3 weeks into our climbing friendship, Emma asked if I wanted to grab dinner after a session at a local crag. Nothing fancy, just a burger place with good beer that she discovered during a recent photo shoot. The evening felt easy and natural, without the performance pressure that had characterized most social interactions during my marriage. "This might be forward," Emma said as we shared a basket of fries, "but you seem like you're coming out of something difficult. I don't need details, but I want you to know there's no pressure here. I'm enjoying getting to know you, whatever pace feels comfortable." Her directness was refreshing. Sarah had always communicated through subtext and strategic positioning. Emma just said what she meant. "I'm recently separated," I told her. "My wife decided our marriage was incompatible with her career goals. Still processing what that means for moving forward." Emma nodded without probing for details or offering unsolicited relationship advice. "That sounds complicated. For what it's worth, you seem like you're handling it with a lot of grace." We kept things light and friendly, but I found myself looking forward to our climbing sessions more than any other part of my week. Emma's company reminded me what it felt like to be appreciated for who I was rather than evaluated for what I could provide. 6 months after Sarah's departure, I received a notification that our divorce was scheduled for a hearing in Portland's family court. The legal process had been straightforward since we'd agreed on asset division through mediation, but seeing the official date made everything feel final in a way that her moving out hadn't. I arrived at the courthouse 15 minutes early, wearing the same navy suit I'd worn to our wedding 4 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it felt appropriate somehow, like completing a circle. Sarah showed up 8 minutes late, looking harried and checking her phone constantly. Her usually immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled, hair pulled back in a messy bun instead of her typical professional styling. "Traffic was insane," she said, sliding into the seat next to me in the hallway outside the courtroom. TechFlow had an emergency client meeting this morning that ran over, and I couldn't just leave in the middle of presenting our Q3 marketing metrics. Even at our divorce hearing, she was justifying her priorities. Some things never changed. "How are you doing?" she asked, finally putting her phone face down on her lap. "You look good. Relaxed." I nodded politely. "I'm doing well. Thanks for asking." The judge called our case, and we stood before his bench while he reviewed our mediation agreement. The entire proceeding took less than 30 minutes. Property division, retirement account splits, no alimony since we'd both maintained separate careers. Clean, efficient, businesslike. Exactly the kind of transaction Sarah appreciated. "The court hereby grants the dissolution of marriage," the judge announced, signing the final decree. "Both parties are free to remarry. Good luck to you both." As we walked out of the courtroom, Sarah seemed reluctant to let the moment end. "Jake, could we talk for a minute? There's something I've been wanting to say." I checked my watch. Emma and I had plans to try a new climbing route that afternoon, but I had a few minutes. "Sure." We found a quiet corner near the courthouse coffee cart. Sarah fidgeted with her phone, then looked directly at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I think I made a mistake," she said quietly. "Not about the career opportunity, but about how I handled everything with us. The way I framed our marriage as holding me back, that wasn't fair." I waited for her to continue, genuinely curious where this was headed. TechFlow has been everything I thought I wanted professionally, but it's also been incredibly isolating. 70-hour weeks, constant travel, networking events where everyone's trying to use everyone else for advancement. I forgot what it felt like to have someone in my corner who actually cared about me as a person. She paused, studying my face for a reaction. I keep thinking about how supportive you were, how you never made me choose between my ambitions and our relationship until I forced that choice myself. Sarah, I said gently, you didn't make a mistake about us. You made an honest assessment of your priorities. You needed to focus entirely on your career, and being married was incompatible with that goal. You were right. Her face fell slightly. But what if I was wrong about what would make me happy? What if I prioritized the wrong things? Then you learned something valuable about yourself. That's not a mistake, that's growth. She looked down at her hands. Is there any chance we could try again? Maybe take things slow, see if we could rebuild something better than what we had before? I felt a strange sense of calm looking at her. 6 months ago, hearing those words might have sent my heart racing. Now they just felt like an interesting data point about human nature and the way people recalculate their choices when consequences become clear. No, Sarah. We can't. Why not? We were good together for a long time. We understood each other, shared similar goals. We shared your goals, I corrected. And we were compatible as long as I was willing to be a supporting character in your story. But I'm not interested in that role anymore. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. For a moment, she looked like she might cry, but then her phone buzzed and she glanced at it reflexively. That's my boss, she said. I need to take this. Of course you do, I said, not unkindly. Take care of yourself, Sarah. I walked away before she could respond, feeling lighter with each step toward the courthouse exit. The divorce was final, and so was that chapter of my life. The irony hit me 3 months later when I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop downtown. He was scrolling through LinkedIn, which had become his weekend hobby since getting promoted to regional sales manager. Dude, you're not going to believe this, he said, showing me his phone screen. Remember TechFlow Solutions? That startup Sarah was so obsessed with. I glanced at the article headline. TechFlow Solutions announces major layoffs following failed Series C funding round. The accompanying photo showed the sleek downtown office building where Sarah had relocated her entire life to pursue her dream career. 70% workforce reduction, Marcus continued reading. Says here they're restructuring operations and eliminating most of their marketing department to focus on core development. Brutal timing for anyone who just joined their team. I felt a strange mix of vindication and genuine sympathy. Sarah had sacrificed our marriage for a position that apparently no longer existed. The corporate housing, the networking events, the 70-hour weeks that were supposed to set her up for life had evaporated along with the venture capital funding that kept startups afloat. Think she got caught in the layoffs? Marcus asked. Probably. She was one of their newer senior hires, and marketing departments are usually the first to get cut when funding dries up. I didn't mention that I genuinely hoped she'd landed somewhere stable. Despite everything, I didn't wish professional failure on her. 2 weeks later, Sarah's sister Amy called me from Colorado. We'd always gotten along well, and she'd been confused and disappointed when Sarah explained the divorce as mutual career-focused separation rather than Sarah's unilateral decision to prioritize work over marriage. Jake, I hope you don't mind me calling directly, Amy said, her voice careful. I know you and Sarah are divorced now, but I wanted to give you a heads up about something. What's going on? Sarah lost her job last month. The whole company went under, basic. She's been staying with our parents since her corporate housing lease ended, and honestly, she's not handling it well. I wasn't surprised, but I felt genuinely sorry for her situation. That's rough. The tech industry can be unpredictable. The thing is, Amy continued, she keeps talking about you. About how she made a huge mistake leaving the marriage, how she's learned what really matters, that sort of thing. I think she might try to reach out. Amy, I appreciate the warning, but I'm not interested in reconnecting. We both moved on for good reasons. I figured as much. You always seemed too level-headed to get pulled back into her drama. But I wanted you to know what's coming. Amy paused. For what it's worth, I think you dodged a bullet. Sarah's always been the type to want whatever she doesn't have. When she had stability with you, she wanted career excitement. Now that the career thing imploded, she wants stability again. Her assessment was brutally accurate. Sarah had a pattern of romanticizing whatever was missing from her current situation rather than appreciating what she actually had. It's why she'd been able to discard 4 years of marriage so easily when TechFlow offered her something that seemed more exciting. 3 days after Amy's call, the texts started coming from a new number. "Jake, this is Sarah. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I really need to talk to you. Everything's fallen apart with my career, and I've had time to think about what really matters." I deleted the message without responding. Her follow-up came the next day. "I know I hurt you and I know I made terrible choices. But we had something real, and I threw it away for something that turned out to be an illusion. Please, can we just talk?" I forwarded the messages to Amy with a note. "This is exactly what you warned me about." Amy replied within minutes. "Want me to tell her to stop? Mom and Dad are getting tired of her moping around anyway." "No need. She'll figure out I'm not responding." But the messages continued. Sarah had apparently decided that persistence would eventually wear down my resolve. She tried different approaches, reminiscing about good memories we'd shared, apologizing for specific things she'd said during our marriage, and eventually moving to desperation tactics about feeling lost and needing guidance from someone who knew her well. I showed Emma the messages one evening as we cooked dinner together at my place. We'd been officially dating for 2 months, and she'd moved some clothes into my spare closet. The contrast between Sarah's manipulative text campaigns and Emma's straightforward presence wasn't lost on me. "She's really pulling out all the stops," Emma observed, reading over the latest batch of messages. "The guilt trips, the nostalgia, the crisis narrative. It's like she's running through a checklist of emotional manipulation techniques." "That's because she is," I said, stirring the pasta sauce. "Sarah approaches everything strategically, including relationships. She's calculated that her best chance of getting my attention is to present herself as vulnerable and regretful." Emma nodded, handing me the wine bottle to taste. "Are you tempted at all? I mean, you were married for 4 years. That has to create some emotional attachment." I considered her question honestly. 6 months ago, maybe. But that person who would have been tempted was someone who thought he wasn't good enough to deserve better. I don't think that way anymore. The truth was, Sarah's attempts at reconnection only reinforced how much I'd grown since our divorce. The man who'd married her would have seen her career failure as an opportunity to prove his worth by rescuing her from the consequences of her choices. The man I'd become understood that her pattern of discarding stability for excitement would inevitably repeat itself once she found her footing again. Nearly a year after our divorce, Sarah appeared outside my office building on a rainy Thursday afternoon in November. I was leaving work early to meet Emma for dinner when I spotted her standing near the main entrance, looking like someone who'd been waiting for a while. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her, and her designer clothes had been replaced with more practical outfits that suggested her financial situation had changed significantly. "Jake," she said, stepping forward as I approached. "I know this is ambush tactics, but you weren't responding to my messages, and I really needed to see you." I stopped about 10 feet away, noting how she looked smaller somehow, less confident than the woman who'd walked out of our marriage with such certainty about her priorities. "What do you want, Sarah?" "I want to talk about rebuilding what we had," she said, her voice carrying a desperate edge I'd never heard before. "I've learned so much about myself over the past year. About what really matters, about what I threw away when I chose my career over our marriage." I felt Emma's presence beside me before I saw her. She'd arrived early for our dinner reservation and spotted me talking to someone outside the building. Her approach was calm and supportive, not possessive or threatened. "Hi," Emma said simply, extending her hand to Sarah. "I'm Emma." Sarah's face went through several expressions as she processed this information. Surprise, calculation, and what looked like genuine dismay. "You're dating someone," she said, looking between Emma and me. "Seriously dating by the looks of it." "Yes," I said. "Emma and I have been together for 8 months." 8 months, Sarah repeated, as if the timeline was significant. So you started seeing her right after our divorce was finalized. Actually, we met while you were still texting me about temporary separations and career focus periods, I corrected. But we didn't start dating until after you made it clear you'd chosen to be single. Emma squeezed my arm gently. I'll wait inside if you two need to talk privately. No need, I said. Whatever Sarah wants to say, she can say it now. Sarah looked at Emma, then back at me, clearly recalculating her approach. Jake, I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left you. I thought I knew what would make me happy, but I was completely wrong. TechFlow was a disaster. The whole industry is toxic and superficial. I spent a year chasing something that turned out to be meaningless. I'm sorry you had a bad experience, I said, meaning it. But that doesn't change anything between us. It changes everything, she said, her voice rising slightly. Don't you see? I learned what you meant to me by losing you. The stability, the support, the way you actually cared about me as a person instead of just using me for networking or advancement opportunities. Emma watched this exchange with interest but no apparent concern, which struck me as remarkable. Sarah was essentially declaring her love for me in front of my current girlfriend, and Emma seemed more curious than threatened. Sarah, I said gently, you're describing what you lost, not what you want. You didn't value those things when you had them. You called our marriage a liability to your potential. I was wrong, she said, tears starting to form. I was scared and stupid and I thought success meant something different than it actually does. But I know better now. We could rebuild something stronger, something better than what we had before. I looked at her for a long moment, seeing not the confident woman who'd left me for her career, but someone who'd discovered that grass wasn't greener and was trying to find her way back to familiar territory. No, Sarah. We can't rebuild anything. Why not? You loved me once. We were happy together for years. We were compatible when I was willing to make myself smaller to accommodate your ambitions. But I've built a life I actually like now, with someone who appreciates who I am instead of trying to optimize me. Emma smiled at that, and I realized how true the statement was. With Sarah, I'd always felt like I was being evaluated for improvement potential. With Emma, I felt accepted and valued exactly as I was. She doesn't know you like I do, Sarah said, desperation creeping into her voice. We have history, shared experiences, inside jokes. 4 years of marriage has to count for something. It does count for something, I agreed. It taught me what I don't want in a relationship. Sarah's face crumpled, and for a moment I felt genuinely sorry for her. She'd gambled everything on a career opportunity that hadn't panned out, and now she was discovering that the stability she'd discarded wasn't waiting around for her return. I know I don't deserve another chance, she said quietly. But I'm asking for one anyway. I've changed, Jake. I understand what really matters now. Have you? I asked. Or do you just want what feels safe after your big risk didn't pay off? She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. The question had hit its mark. When you find your next exciting opportunity, I continued, when someone offers you the promotion or the adventure or whatever it is that seems more appealing than daily commitment, what's going to stop you from making the same choice again? She stared at me, unable to answer because we both knew the truth. Sarah would always be the type of person who wanted whatever she didn't have. The conversation was over, but Sarah made one final attempt. Please, Jake, just think about it. Don't make any permanent decisions while you're still angry with me. I'm not angry, I said and meant it. I'm grateful. You leaving forced me to build a better life than the one I thought I wanted. Emma and I walked away together, leaving Sarah standing in the rain outside my office building. As we headed to dinner, Emma broke the silence. That was intense. Are you okay? I'm perfect, I said, taking her hand. That conversation was exactly what I needed to prove to myself that I really have moved on. A week later, Amy called to tell me Sarah had moved to Denver for a marketing coordinator position at a smaller company. The job was a significant step down from her previous role, but it was stable employment with reasonable hours. She's finally accepted that the Jake chapter is closed, Amy said. I think seeing you with Emma made it real for her in a way that the divorce papers didn't. I genuinely hoped Sarah would find what she was looking for in Colorado, but more importantly, I no longer cared whether she did or not. My life had moved completely beyond the space she used to occupy, and that felt like the real victory. Emma and I were planning a weekend trip to Bend for some winter climbing, and I found myself looking forward to building more memories with someone who actually wanted to be there. The greatest revenge, it turned out, wasn't proving Sarah wrong about my worth. It was discovering that her opinion of my worth had never mattered in the first place.